Welcome to a Telltale Books video. I'm Greg, and I'm here continuing my H.G. Wells series with a report on his short story, The Thumbmark. Now this, by my reckoning, is Wells' 23rd published work. It was published in June 28th, 1894, in the Pall Mall Budget magazine, just a week after The Stolen Bacillus appeared in that same magazine. The story starts out with a professor's house on the grounds of a university having been burned down. Now, the chemistry professor at the university aids the fire department in finding out what caused the fire. And he finds that a specific chemical reaction caused the fire. And he knows that the only place in quite a large area where those chemicals could have been obtained was his classroom. So he locks the door of his classroom with all the students in it and starts going through his reasoning. I'll stop there. I don't want to spoil the story for you, but this is a detective mystery story that hinges on science, very much a Sherlock Holmes kind of thing, deductive reasoning, scientific reality. And now, I haven't read any of the Sherlock Holmes stories. Sherlock Holmes did start appearing in the 1880s, so quite a ways before the Thumbmark was published. And of course, there were a lot of other detective mysteries being written in England at this time. So Wells was just kind of joining the pack with this story, and didn't really gain much notoriety for this sort of thing. But his story, the generally believed pioneer of this type of story was Edgar Allan Poe, with The Murders in the Rue Morgue and The Purloined Letter and The Mystery of Marie Roget and his French detective. And I hated all three of those stories. I've read all three. I hated all three of them because it was just nothing but a dialogue of this detective explaining all his reasoning, explaining all his deductions. It was the stories were tedious, boring, and I just hated them. This story has the deductive reasoning, but it's less of a dialogue of the professor telling how brilliant he is, and a lot more story going on, which makes me like this better. And if you've read Agatha Christie, that's how Agatha Christie does things, is she has a story and the detective progressively finds details, and then toward the end of the story puts them all together through deductive reasoning to solve the mystery. But you actually have a story, a plot, characters, action. And that's what Wells does here in The Thumbmark, making this a very, very enjoyable, very readable story. And of course, it hinges on science, which Wells would have known: biology, chemistry. He studied that under a number of brilliant people in England, and so he was up on the latest in his day, including the idea of fingerprinting. I don't know exactly when fingerprinting came about in detective work, but that this story hinges on a fingerprint that was able to be obtained. So I'm guessing that fingerprinting was relatively new in 1894, because that's what makes a story something that readers in 1894 might go, oh wow, gosh, that's cool, that they didn't know that stuff. Today it's basic. So the Thumbmark is a pretty good story, and I do recommend it. It's not a top tale. It's definitely not one of Wells's best short stories, but it is worth reading, especially if you like H.G. Wells, especially if you like Victorian detective mysteries. This story is definitely something you should give a try. And it's a short story, a very short story. And of course, I have that story in the complete short stories of H.G. Wells, my favorite H.G. Wells book, because there's just so much in it, and it's so thorough at collecting his short stories. I can pretty much find anything in there. So have you ever read the Thumbmark? If so, leave your comments in the comments section. My next H.G. Wells video is going to be what comes after the Thumbmark, Mr. Ledbetter's Vacation. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and come on back and join me for Mr. Ledbetter's Vacation, a lot more H.G. Wells, and a lot of other stories, science fiction and not, that we cover here on Telltale Books.